Okay, everyone, we'll start off. As you know, this is a presentation on recycling as part of Reading Climate Change Festival. So thank you all for joining. Hopefully it's going to be good and informative. We can have a bit of fun. We'll ask some questions and we'll do some polls. I'm just going to introduce a couple of people. Monica is here. Monica's put this brilliant presentation together, and she's going to be supporting us throughout today. And then also we've got a guest person on this is Laura Pickett, who is our MRF supervisor. She's in charge of the place where all your recycling gets taken and sorted out. She was just waving then. Laura will take over the presentation in a short while. First of all, there are some bits of housekeeping, as you probably expect. We've put everyone on mute just at this point in time, but it's important to say that there will be both some time at the end for verbal questions for us all to have a chat. And also it's important, as you can see towards the bottom of this slide, please use the chat window to ask any questions that come to you during the course of the presentation. And we'll pick up on some of those at the end as well. You can use your reactions during the course of the discussion or the presentation, and as I say, there'll be some polls, a couple of polls on this occasion that we'll do during the course of the presentation, so it's a bit of interactive stuff as well. So without further ado, a bit about us. re3 is a partnership of 3 councils. Have a population of about 450,000 people, and as you probably know, you've probably been to one of the 2 sites, if not both of them. The work is all based around 2 waste management facilities, one in Reading and one in Bracknell. First thing on this one is we just wanted to say thank you as well. It's all been a bit of a funny old year, hasn't it? But we haven't forgotten really that a couple of months into the year, everyone was very kindly putting rainbows out for the bin men and women, and then obviously where we work, and particularly where Laura's staff work, they were working throughout as well. I don't know if there are many places in our 3 borough councils that will have received the waste from every single person in the borough council, but that's where we work, and Laura's staff have all been sorting through the recycling and everything. So all the rainbows, all the thanks, all of that, it was really lovely, and it made a lot of difference to those people throughout this period. And so this is a bit of a thanks to you as well. So we thought we'd have a bit of a guess as to why you would come along to a presentation like this. The first one is we thought there might be some confusion about recycling, or at least some queries about recycling. So that might be one reason. The other reason is, of course, and this is a lot, is relevant to a lot of sort of things around climate change and general sustainability, is that sometimes people aren't as sure as they might be about how small individual actions can add up to a big impact. And working in an area of 450,000, nearly 500,000 people, that is precisely how it works. We have to rely on everyone doing their bit to add up to a big pile of waste or recycling and all the sorts of things that we can do. So that's really important, and we'll talk about some of that during the course of today. And obviously for people, particularly people who are from Reading Borough, but also potentially if any of you are from Bracknell, there are some quite significant changes coming ahead, and we'll touch on those during the course of today as well. So we're going to split this presentation into 3 lots of 3 really. We're going to give you the 3 reasons why recycling is a good thing to do, 3 tips that help you improve your recycling habits, and we're going to kind of try and address 3 myths about recycling. So that's how we're going to base this presentation. So we're going to start off with the 3 good reasons. And the first one really is that recycling helps to save the environment. And I think that's probably generally understood, or at least generally sort of believed by people. But a couple of examples there. 1 ton of recycled plastic saves the equivalent of 16 barrels of oil, and 1 ton of recycled paper saves up to 17 trees. And that's really the reason why we say it's good for the environment, because by recycling products, we can prevent virgin resources having to be taken from the environment. I think we probably all prefer, yes, trees are sustainable and they grow and we can plant more and so on and so forth, but we probably all prefer 17 trees than 1 ton of nice new paper, when we know that we can recycle it really well. And obviously we know with finite resources like oil and things like metal ores and all those sorts of things, it's actually much better if we can recycle it to do that than it is to dig up or mine or extract from the earth new materials. The second one is it saves money. So not only is it good for the environment, but actually on a really local level, it helps us to save money. It's 3 times more expensive for us to send waste to landfill than it is to recycle it. And obviously we also know that when we do put it in landfill, there are legacy costs. That's part of what that's talking about, both financial and environmental. And also we're quite proud, and I know Laura works in a team that markets and sort of makes sure that the material that you give us, the waste and the packaging that you give us, is ultimately recycled. We really like the idea that we're involved in that. We know that there are about 100,000 people employed in the waste management industry. I think there's something like about 75 to 80 employed locally. And it's really good that there is an economy around this, because, you know, for good or bad, that is how a lot of business works. And it's a great thing that we can be supporting the local economy and doing those other things locally as well for the environment, and in terms of direct savings to you as taxpayers, and so we can divert money into other services. So those are our 3 reasons. There's always a but, isn't there? And the but here is we can always do a bit more. So the first poll question, I'm going to give you a bit of a poll, and the question is going to be, and you'll see it in a second, is have you noticed any changes to your waste during lockdown and the period in between the 2 lockdowns, I suppose, since the pandemic started? So I'm going to launch that now, and if you guys are happy to vote, you can. It's a multiple choice question, so there you go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Right, as you can see, people have noticed that they've got more recycling, which is good. People have noticed that they've got more general waste, about 22%. Over half, as I say, nearly 2/3 is I've got more recycling. And I haven't noticed any changes. That's quite interesting as well. Thanks for doing that. We're gonna stop sharing that now, and we'll move on and show you some of the things we've noticed from measuring. All your waste comes in and goes over a weighbridge, so we measure what's happening, obviously in a general sense. This is actually what we've measured during that period, that there's 8% more mixed dry recycling, so that's effectively the recycling that you put out for collection. But we've also noticed here on the right-hand side that there's 12% more residual waste. So in Reading, in your grey bins, in Bracknell, in your green bins, and in Wokingham, in the blue bags. So that's not such a good balance between those 2 things. We actually really want the recycling to be higher than the residual waste. However, I would say we've also noticed, and there's no judgment here, but glass at the bottle banks is up by 46%. So people have been doing something. We suspect that's probably to do with pubs being closed and that sort of thing. But that's really good. We obviously want to recycle that. In Wokingham, we've noticed that there was 39% more food waste compared with the same period last year. And we obviously think that's probably to do with the fact that people have been working from home. So in many cases, a lot more people will have been at home having meals that they would previously perhaps have had at work. Children were off school for longer as well. And we noticed that there's 16% more green waste. So I guess, again, that's similar. That's probably down to the fact that people have been home a little bit more than they would normally have been. Those are what we've actually measured during the course of this year. So we're going to go straight into another poll question, since you were so good at that last one. And I'll launch this one. This one is about what's coming forward around the food waste service, particularly in Reading and in Bracknell. So I'll launch that now. Right, I'll give it 10 more seconds and then I'll share it with everyone. Right, there we go. So this is quite interesting. We've obviously got some people at the top there who are from Wokingham and are doing it, or from one of the early adopter areas in Reading, where there are 3,000 people doing it at the moment. So that's good. We particularly like the I am using it all the time bit of that. So very well done. And then obviously the largest group of people there are people saying, yes, can't wait. Actually, neither can we. So there are some people who aren't interested in this service as well. And maybe we can try and persuade you. And I'm not sure, I need some more information. Well, perhaps we'll try, maybe principally through the questions, maybe we can try and get into some of that at the end as well. So I'll stop sharing this now. Thanks for doing it again. And we'll move on. So we've had a look at the increase in waste through the period of the pandemic. And now what we're going to do for each of the 3 councils, we're going to look at what's actually in your disposal bins. So again, just to remind you, for Reading, it will be the grey bins. For Bracknell, it will be your green bins. And for Wokingham residents, it will be your blue bags. So this is the stuff that you're throwing out, not for recycling, but this is rubbish that you would expect to be disposed of. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So we did some work, some very generalized work on what the composition of those disposal bins and bags was. And we can see that for Bracknell, and we'll go through each council, for Bracknell, 42% of what was being thrown away was actually food waste. Now at the time in Bracknell, that couldn't have been recycled, but very soon it will be. 33% was general waste. And then here at the bottom, we've got these 3 categories in orange, 11, 8, and 6 for paper, plastics, aluminium, and tins. So those are the things that you can put out for collection, glass and textiles, and wood, metals, and electricals. And these are all things that actually can be recycled locally. So we've got 42% here at the top that very soon will be able to be recycled through the food waste collections. And then we've got 25% at the bottom here that can already be recycled. And yet these things are things that are still going in the residual bin. So these are the key areas really for us. This is why we say there is always more that we can do. So let's just have a quick whip through the other councils. Here in Reading, we've got 40% food waste. Can't really see what that figure is, but we'll do a little bit of quick maths. What we've got, 16, 27, 67. So that means that's 33, something like that. 33% general waste. And then at the bottom, we've got a similar figure, 25%, or identical figure, 25%, which is, again, those things that can be recycled. So again, we're just saying here really that, very soon, particularly when that 40% becomes something that we can deal with through a new collection, which will start in Reading in February, very soon we're going to be able to slim our bins incredibly, hopefully. And again, I'll just stress, this is why we say there's a little bit more we can be done. These are all very generalized, not pointing the finger at anyone in particular. In Wokingham, 38% food waste, and these figures were taken before the food waste collection started. 37% in that general waste for these blue bags. And then again, 25% in glass and textiles, paper, plastics, the food cans, and then wood, metal, and electricals that can be recycled through the recycling centres or somewhere else. So again, there's a lot of waste that's being put out for disposal, which doesn't need to be put out for disposal, particularly now in Wokingham. So what should we be recycling? These are the things that we would look for. And I guess for many of you, these will be familiar already, but we'll just have a quick whip through just to make sure that everyone's familiar and to refresh. So we've got plastic bottles, tubs, yogurt pots, those see-through trays, cleaning plastic bottles from the bathroom, for example, drink cans, food tins, aerosols is one that sometimes people forget. takeaway and metal trays, and then cartons as well. And then the obvious, the sort of heavier and larger quantities of newspapers still, particularly cardboard, and we've seen an increase in that, and things like breakfast cereal and so on and so forth. We say we don't want those in black sacks or carrier bags, and when Laura comes on in a moment, you'll see exactly why that's the case. Again, to do the same thing, but on the other side, these are the things we don't want to see. Black bags, plastic bags, black trays, which probably you know about, polystyrene trays, they're harder to recycle, broken and drinking glasses and plate glass, in fact, as well. That melts at a completely different temperature than bottle glass, so that causes a bit of a problem if that's included. Plastic film and wrapping, food pouches, nappies, hard plastics and broken toys, those sorts of things. Garden furniture also falls into that category. Crisp packets and those crunchy sort of packaging. Wipes and tissues, not particularly nice, and particularly not when you're in the middle of a global pandemic. And pet poo and litter as well are ones that we don't want in the recycling. And these are things which sort of don't fit inside the collections at the moment, across the whole area, but either are in part, such as food waste in Wokingham, or very soon will be. So exactly as I said before, Bracknell and Reading will be introducing their food waste collections early in the new year. Garden waste collections, obviously, everyone is aware of, I'm sure. And glass bottles and jars, clothing, really important one, and then small electricals. Particularly for those of you in Reading, small electricals are something that can be collected from your home by your refuse team. So tip number one, just checking to see if anyone else was coming in. Tip number one, keep your stuff clean, please. We don't expect you to wash it all, but and we will let everybody use their sort of diligence. But if the stuff that you're putting out for recycling could be clean, that would be best. It's just about really perhaps giving it a quick swoosh around the washing up bowl, maybe just try and clear it out a little bit. It really should be empty and dry, and that goes a bit back to the cleanliness thing. We don't want lots of baked beans in the bottom of the baked bean tin, for example. And ideally, it needs to be loose as well. In a moment, you're going to see from Laura how it's sorted out, and you'll see through that process why it's really important that it is loose. We know that up to 20%, 1 in 5 items in the recycling are actually not suitable, and trying to reduce the amount of what we would call in the industry contamination is really important. The quality of the material that we make available to people who are going to make new products is really, really important. I'm sure you can appreciate for them, if the quality is high, they have to do less sorting at their end. Bit more on plastics. There are 3 principal grades of plastic. We do get a little bit of polystyrene in yogurt pots in particular, but principally we're after 1, 2, and 5 if you're looking at the little plastic numbers. So we've got the clear ones are generally PET. HDPE are the slightly opaque or coloured ones, and then we also have PVC in a lot of the tubs and trays and things like that. You will know that I think many supermarkets over the course of 2019 began to say they were going to phase out black plastic. So that's happening. That perhaps won't be as much of a problem for anyone going forward, but there are still quite a few products that are in black plastic. There's a couple of problems with those, and again, Laura will touch on the first one, which is whether we can sort them out. The other one is that the dye that they use, the kind of dye that they use in the plastic, really means that it's very difficult to do anything else with that other than make more black plastic, and sometimes that's not always possible. So that is being phased out. And the other one I would say around is carrier bags. You may have heard that the levy on carrier bags is going to be doubled up to 10p from April next year. So we would hope really that that will have a reducing effect on the number of plastic bags that we get. It's important for people to keep reusing those, really. That's the main thing. The second tip that we've got is if you haven't already, have a look and see whether you can download our Recyclopedia app. It's very useful. It's designed to reduce confusion that people may have over what products can be recycled and what products can't. It uses a massive database of products. So, for example, if you're buying, for example, a ready meal that might have 2 or 3 different bits, it might have a cardboard sleeve, it might have a plastic tray, and then a film top to it, for example. The Recyclopedia app will tell you exactly what you need to do with each of those 3 bits. You can search via a product name or a product type or a packaging type. Also, you can access all the information that you need about your own waste collection system there. And also you can access the click and tip service to book a visit to the recycling site through that app. So there's a lot of things there all in one place, and that's developing all the time as well. So it's getting better and better. And then finally from me, tip 3, just I suppose an appeal to be smart about your waste at home. I'm sure you already do this, but search for information and learn about what you can recycle and what you can't recycle, and the app can help. Make sure you have a separate container for recycling, perhaps in different places around the house, which might sound a bit out there and a bit kind of extreme, but a lot of recycling, we often think about it at the point that we're at the bin, and that might be too late. We often have lots of things that we can recycle in the kitchen and the bathroom. So if we've got containers there, that's really handy. Always plan your trip to the recycling centre. At the moment, we are having to book people in, and that's part of making sure that everyone can socially distance on site and that everyone can stay safe when they visit the sites. Try and reduce your food waste. We saw that food waste had gone up by 39% throughout the period of the lockdown. But it's possible through planning and through careful attention. And again, these are all generalized comments, not pointing the finger at anyone, but it is possible to reduce the amount of food waste we are generating in the first place. And please continue to take your bottles and jars to the bottle banks. We work hard to try and empty them as possible, and it has been a bit harder to do that during the period of the pandemic, because obviously lots of people have been using them, but we're trying to empty them all the time. So now I'm going to ask Laura to unmute herself, and I'm going to pass over to Laura, who will talk to you about what happens to your recycling after it's been collected. Over to you, Laura.
Yeah, fab. Thank you, Oliver. So as Oliver said earlier, I'm the MRF supervisor. So I work for the contractor, which is FCC Environment, who work with the 3 councils to make sure that all of your waste is recycled and reused where possible. So this first slide is just a promise. So we'd like you to promise that as residents of the RE3 boroughs, you can make an effort to put all of your waste into the right bins. So whether that's your general bin or your recycling bin. And then from our side, we will do our best to make sure that all of your waste will become a resource and then turn into something new and used again and given a longer life. So this slide just shows the different types of economies that we had. So previously, we had something called a linear economy. So this meant that we would take a resource from the environment, so a tree to make paper or aluminium core to make a can. We'd make that into a product. It would be used by somebody, and then it would be disposed of, typically put into landfill. And that happened over and over again, and it meant that everything that you use had a very short life. What we have now is something called a circular economy. So we still have that initial input of a resource. So we still have that first aluminium core to use to make a can. Once it's used, it's then recycled and it's then made back into a can for a second time. So it can keep going round and round, and it can be used a number of times before it then has to be disposed of in the end. So this is where we're going now. It's come a long way in the last 20 or so years, and circular economy is becoming more evident, and for the next few slides you'll see how your waste is part of this circular economy. So another poll, so I think Oliver will start this one. So do you know what happens to your waste after it gets collected at your curbside? Oh, fab. So a lot of people have said a little bit, which I think is pretty normal. you know. There's so many things that you can do with different materials, so I'm sure it is quite confusing sometimes what happens to it. So hopefully the next few slides I go over will be able to tell you all that, and hopefully the people that have answered no completely will go away with a bit more of an idea of what happens when you put it in your bin. Fab. So these figures on your screen now were published in our annual environmental report. So we publish this every year. It's free to the public. If you go on our website, the re3.org, you can get a copy of the environmental report and see how we've done the last year. So from the period of 2019-2020, we had 22,600 tonnes of mixed dry recycling, 25,000 tonnes of garden waste, 7,495 tonnes of glass, and 5,100 tonnes of food waste. And that was all recycled by you as residents throughout the year. And the figures at the bottom, so that shows the 175,000 tonnes of waste. So that's what was brought in from your collections. And then the recycling rates there are on the other side. So you can see how well your borough did on recycling. So you can see that Bracknell Forest was at 43%, Reading Borough 35%, and Wokingham at 50%. So really good figures, and hopefully now with the introduction of food waste and things like that, those figures are going to keep going up. So the 3 myths. So this is the first one. Recycling is a waste of time and it all goes abroad anyway. Definitely a myth. So this slide here, so you can see the map on the right hand side. This is published in our environmental report, so you can see that those little white dots are each of the different off-takers that we use to recycle your material. So you can see that lots of them are in the UK, and a lot of them are even down south near to us. So even though recycling is a global industry, you know, it happens all over the world, we want to try and keep as much as we can in the UK, and if we can here close to our boroughs. We as a company make sure that we monitor all of the off-takers that we use to make sure that they're responsible and that they're recycling your material to its best potential. And as you can see, over 90% of our off-takers are here in the UK, and 100% of your plastics are recycled here by a company called J-Plas. So all of your plastic stays here in the UK and is made into new products to then be sold back in the UK again. Your garden waste. So a couple of years ago, we started creating our compost. So another part of the circular economy here. When you bring your green waste either to our site in Reading or in Bracknell, or into your bin collection by your curbside, it's brought to the facilities and it's bulked up and taken to our FCC facility in Sutton Courtenay in Oxford, and it's turned into compost there. So it's using open windrow composting, and it creates a really high quality past 100 standard compost, which we then bring back to the sites, and we can sell it back to you as re3 residents to put back on your plants. And then hopefully again the next year you'll bring it back as green waste, and we'll keep that going. So just one small example of how you guys bringing your green waste either to site or to your bins contributes to that circular economy and helps to save a little bit of the environment. Food waste. So as Oliver touched on before, it's a new concept. So Wokingham have been doing it for a while, and then hopefully Reading and Bracknell bringing it in place in the new year, which is really exciting. But this, again, another part of the circular economy. When you deliver your, separate your food waste and it's brought to our site, it's taken to a anaerobic digestion plant in Wallingford in Oxford again. It's turned into the sort of sludge that you can see on the bottom left. It doesn't look that nice, but what it creates is amazing. So what it does is that sludge gets put into these digestion tanks, and inside of the digestion tanks are microbes, which are like little bugs, and they go around and they eat your food waste, which then creates methane gas, which in turn helps to generate electricity, which we put back into the national grid. So even though it's not making food again, it is making another resource. So again, that circular economy continues with you guys just putting your food waste into a different bin. And residual waste. So even your household waste, so your black bin bags, all of that material contributes to our circular economy. So it's delivered to the energy from waste facility on the M4 near Heathrow Airport. And in there, the waste is burnt and it creates steam, which powers turbines to create electricity again, put back into the national grid, create another resource from your waste. And then this electricity that's produced at this facility is enough electricity to power the entirety of Slough. So it's a huge amount of electricity, and that is going a long way. But what we're going to do from that general waste is make sure that we haven't got any materials which can be recycled ending up in that residual waste bin, because we just want to take the residual waste that can't be recycled, turn it into electricity, but then keep the good recycling waste and turn it back into another resource to be used again. So are we sending any waste to landfill? Yes, because unfortunately not everything can be recycled yet. So at the beginning of the re3 contract, which began in 2007, we were sending 62% of waste to landfill, and that has dropped massively to just 12% now in 2020. So it's been a huge achievement by everybody. That includes you as residents especially, to bring it that way. So you can see that our recovery rates have increased, and also people are producing less waste because they're reusing more, they're recycling more, and we're being a lot more successful in what we're doing with our waste at the end of the day. So the main things that we send to landfill are the bulky items, so things like mattresses, chairs, sofas, that sort of thing. We can't recycle that at the moment. So if we can't reuse it because it's past, it's not in good enough condition for someone to reuse an item, it will be sent to landfill. But that number is coming down and down as we go on through the years. So hopefully one day, you never know, someone might come up with a way to recycle a mattress and we won't have to do that anymore. Like it says there, any of your non-recyclable waste that you put in your black bin, most of that will go to energy from waste plants. So it will be made into another resource. Myth 2. So this one says that recycling doesn't help climate crisis and it uses more energy than it saves. So the next slide that's going to come up will sort of give you an indication of how much energy is saved. So this shows you how much energy it takes to create an item from a recycled material compared to the natural source. So it takes 92% less energy to create aluminium cans from an old aluminium can, as opposed to if we extracted the core at its natural source again. So it's same for copper. Copper is 90%. We save 90% of energy when we recycle copper, 87% for plastic, 68% for paper, 56% for steel, and 34% for glass. So huge amounts of energy are being saved by recycling and making it into a new product than if we were to start again from scratch. Myth 3, it doesn't matter if I put the wrong, wet or dirty things in my recycling, as it all gets sorted out anyway. Unfortunately, that is a myth. It'd be nice if it would do it all itself, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So this is the bit that I manage. So this is a picture of our MRFs. That is our materials recycling facility, and that is based at the Smallmead site in Reading. So the picture there, that's our input bay. So that is all of your mixed dry recycling in one big pile ready to go through the MRF. And the little picture in the center, that's the conveyor belts. So our MRF has about 75 to 80 conveyor belts moving across with different materials on. And that's how we get your material separated. So I think the next slide. So this is an example of what we do. So we create bales of material. So when your material is wrong or wet or dirty, it has huge issues for how our plant can work. So if you put the wrong item in, first of all, there's a chance that it may not get recycled, because if you're not putting it in the right place, then we can't do anything with it. So when you put something like a kettle or an iron, which can be recycled at the recycling centres, but can't through the MRF, then you run the risk of it not leading its full potential. When you put a dirty or wet item in the material, it reduces the quality. And Oliver mentioned before that we have to make sure that our material is the highest quality, so that then we can give it its further life, so we can send it to someone who will reuse it. there's a risk that if any items are wet or dirty, that an off-taker may not want the material because it's too much effort and energy for them to have to go through it again after we've done our part. So by putting the dry, clean, right items into your recycling bin, we can get the most potential from your recycling and give it its next, 30 lives just by you doing the right thing once. So I believe Monica's going to put a video in the chat box, but this is a little pictogram of how our MRF works. So at the bottom, there is an input bay. So all of your material gets delivered in and it's all loose and it all sits in one big pile. And then we take it using a big loading shovel and we load it into something called a hopper. So in the hopper, there is a bag splitter. So as we mentioned before, we want all the material to be loose so we can go through the conveyor belts easily. But just in case somebody forgets, we do have a bag splitter in there, so it will rip open. It's sort of like teeth, and it'll rip open all of the bags so all the material can lie loose and go through the process. It goes up the first conveyor belt to something called our pre-sort cabin. So inside that cabin, there are 2 members of staff, and they will go through what comes across the belt, and they're essentially looking in that first cabin for any materials which may be in the wrong place and could potentially cause a lot of damage to our MRF. So they're pulling out, usually, let's say we end up there pulling out things like irons and kettles. We've had a couple of tree stumps come across there before. We've had animals, would you believe? All sorts of things come across there which shouldn't be in. But that's their job to pull it out, because if something that's rather large, like a big piece of metal, for example, gets past that point, there's a huge risk that it can cause a lot of damage to the MRF, which means that we're having to have a lot of downtime to do any fixes. And it's also mean that we're not processing your material and not making the most from your hard work at recycling because somebody's put the wrong item in. So after it's gone through the pre-sort cabin, it goes to something called the trommel, and it's basically like a big washing machine, and it's got holes of different sizes in it. So as the trommel spins around, it separates the material depending on size. And from there, it goes a number of different ways. We've got a big magnet, an eddy current magnet, and this will separate your steel and your alley. And the rest of the material, so the paper and plastics, will go the other way, and that goes through a number of machines called Titex. So we have 16 Titex around our MRF, and they use light and infrared in order to send the material to the right location. So it will use the light to notice if it's a plastic or if it's a paper, and then using an air knife, the air knife will push the paper a certain way. It's another reason why we need loose, dry material, because if it's wet, things tend to stick together. So if you have a wet piece of paper and it's stuck to a plastic bottle, the Titex can't understand whether it's plastic or it's paper, and we run the risk of contamination. Again, if it's not loose and it's all in one big bag, the Titex can't notice what's inside the bag. So again, we run the risk of losing all that great recycled material and it ending up in our residue bay because the Titex can't understand what it is. The cabins after the Titex, so the last point of call, we have about 25 pickers on our day shift and 15 on our night shift who work to make sure that all of the material is pulled out. Any last minute contamination that's managed to sneak through, all of the mechanical parts of the MRF, they'll pull out. They'll make sure that all the card goes in the right place, all the plastic, different types of plastic goes in the right place, until eventually it's put into our bunkers. And once the bunker is full of material, it's placed onto our baling belt and it's sent and made into these little cubes that you see. So hopefully when you drive into the small mead facility especially, you'll see all the nice bales of plastic ready to go out, ready to be loaded and turned into something new. And we do one brand of loose material. So we send our news and pans loose, but everything else we bale to get the most amount of recycling onto a lorry to save energy, to save the environment, and to make sure that you can recycle as much as possible.
Right, I think is the video now.
We're making recycling easier than ever before, and we have crews working hard every day to make sure that not just your waste is picked up, but all your recycling is properly sorted so we can get things back into use and not waste them in landfill sites.
All collected recycling from the 3 councils comes here to the re3 material recycling facility in Reading, where it's all weighed in and weighed out. Your plastic bottles, yoghurt pots, cans, cardboard and newspapers enter the facility through a hopper, and there start a life-changing journey over hundreds of metres of conveyor belts. Eventually all the materials are separated, they fall into bunkers and then are sent to be baled. They're then loaded and sent to different reprocessors. Producing a high quality of recycling is our priority, so that product manufacturers can turn your waste into quality new products. Recycling is in your hands. Each of us can do a bit more, and even the smallest actions can have big impact.